Yeah, good evening, Rabbi Markiz. If you want to put on the recording, good evening. There might be people joining, especially in the next few minutes, uh, but it's great to have everyone this evening as we kick off our Spotlight Educators series. Here with Rabbi Markiz, a rabbi and educator. Um, in the DC area, but has been with us. I know visited our congregation a couple of years ago as well. And it's always great to learn with you and learn from you. We're going to turn it over to Rabbi Markiz, um, who is bringing us scholarship of someone we might not be as familiar with. And we're very excited for this class and this series over the next 6 weeks. I think every week, except for Thanksgiving, we'll be meeting over the coming 2 months. So thank you, and we'll turn it over to you.
Amazing. Thank you, Rabbi Foster.
Thanks.
I'm really excited to be back with B'nai Yeshua, and holds a special place in my heart. So glad to be here and be with you. And yeah, we're going to learn some Hasidic text, some Hasidic Torah. In particular, the book of Tzidkat HaTzadik, or Tzidkas HaTzadik, depending on your pronunciation, persuasion. I was told I said it too, not Ashkenazic enough. I was telling someone I was teaching this. I was told I didn't pronounce it Ashkenazic enough. And so do with that what you will. And I'll give you a bio and other kinds of things later about him and the interesting story that he has. We are going to dig in a little bit in a reflective way. I know I'm being a little confusing at the moment, so you'll bear with me. Let me start with this. Have folks learned Hasidic texts before? Is that something that is roughly familiar? I know most of you have your cameras off, so you can give me a thumbs up or put it in the chat. Great. Tybal, is that a thumbs up or a raised hand?
It was meant to be a thumbs up. Oh, whoops.
That's okay. So in brief, the Hasidic movement, Hasidic literature emerges in the 1700s following the leadership of the Baal Shem Tov, which was his nickname. His first name was Israel. His last name escapes me at the moment. And he encourages a mystical approach around the simple Jew. And the movement that follows draws on that mystical tradition, pulling from the Zohar and other places, and offers a different way of approaching Jewish spirituality that had not yet emerged, merging simplicity and community with the mystical tradition. The Tzidkat HaTzadik appears a number of generations later and emerges from the Ishbitzer thread. It doesn't really matter. All of it, which we can sort of unpack another day, which is to say that he takes a very interesting approach. But before we get into the text, my hope is that if you can come on camera, that you will. If you can't, you can't. That's cool. I'd love to invite a conversation, just as way of introduction, is to share a story of profound spiritual moment in your life, and just to describe what that experience was like. And I'll go first. No one has to go first. I'll go first to share at least one of mine, and folks will have a chance to share what that looks like for them. When I was a first-year rabbinical student, we spent the day, this was in December, learning the Talmudic texts of Hanukkah. And I remember coming home after spending the whole day studying Hanukkah texts to light my menorah. And I sat there in the dark in my apartment on the ground floor with my window to see the next building about 8 feet away. So not a lot of natural light coming down between those buildings. And lighting my menorah and just sitting and basking in the light. There was a profound, tangible moment for me where I felt like God was peeking through the veil. That God's presence was emerging from the light and from the quiet and from just being in that space. And in a way that I continue to draw spiritual meaning from. It continues to be a place of motivation. And really it sort of changed me, and it's a deeply spiritual moment for me. So that's my experience. That's the story I'll share in this moment. I would invite, doesn't have to be like that. You can have your own story of your own type, but I'd love to hear a little bit about a spiritual moment in your life, which will be relevant for our text as we dig in. Anyone want to share? Yeah. You only have a first letter, so say your name as well, please.
It's Terry Zimmerman. We were really fortunate when we lived in New Orleans that Elie Wiesel accepted an invitation to be present and do a fundraiser for a synagogue. And it was the first time that I heard anyone really do a drash on Torah. And it was specifically the Noah story. So I learned from him this aspect of that he was righteous for his generation, but it was also his whole, like, I'm partly thinking of it because he did come from a Hasidic childhood. And so that just experience of him talking of that story and showing how deep you could go from a text, and that he had given us some background about his childhood. And I think he was started to be taught Kabbalah at 14 or so, when they were really supposed to wait until they were 40. So it was, he somehow, in a very short amount of time, packed this profound thing and was just so engaging. And that was a really deep spiritual experience to see him and hear him teaching, just with a little desk and a little book right in front of him in this room of 300 sanctuary with 300 or 500 people.
Amazing. Thank you. Anyone else would like to share? Yeah. Shira, please. You're unmuted. Oh, wait, sorry.
You're still muted.
There we go. I was saying Kaddish for my parents, and it was overlapping. They died within 5 months of each other. And the day that after I finished saying Kaddish, and I remained seated, I had this profound sense of having crossed a threshold.
Amazing.
And then another couple of times, once when I was in Haleakala on Maui, and once when I was in the White Mountains, I experienced the profoundest of quiet. And that was spiritual for me as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Shira. Freda, I think you did, and then Michelle will come to you after.
Hi, I'm Freda. Back in the 80s, when HIV was newly acknowledged and recognized, I began to volunteer with an AIDS organization where we had many times a year, maybe probably 6 or 7 times a year, we had a weekend for people who had newly tested. It was so profound and intimate and soul to soul, connecting with people who felt very alienated and disregarded, and I think they all thought of me as their mother, but anyway, many of them, their families had really rejected them and all. And to be able to just be with these people, at that time it was almost all men, and connect instantaneously almost. We would have, we would dance, we would have support groups, all that kind of thing. The sort of the epitome of it was that during that weekend, I had to go to a dinner dance. And someone who I didn't know, who I sat next to at the dinner dance said, "Oh, what would you do today?" And they said, "Oh, that must be so strange to be in that kind of a setting all weekend." I said, "Actually, being here is strange." Because being able to really, really connect with people on such a deep, deep level is what fills my soul and continues to be, even all these years later, one of the most spiritual kinds of connections I've had.
Amazing. Thank you, Freda.
Mhm.
Michelle, and then Alina after that.
Two come to mind. One very quickly, when I was a kid and went to Camp Ramah for the first time, that I always thought going to synagogue in Judaism meant going to my very large synagogue in West Hartford, Connecticut, and always dressing a certain way. And like, it never really occurred to me as a kid that Judaism existed outside of this very large synagogue. And to understand that you can daven in t-shirt and shorts and under a tree and next to the lake, and that your Judaism is everywhere where you are, that's still a very profound feeling that I have, that I thankfully got when I was 12. But the other one that comes up much later is after the birth of my first child in April, that very first Rosh Hashanah, we were at my parents' and with this 6-month-old baby, and we had hired someone to watch him so we could all go off to synagogue. And at the last minute, she called and said she was ill and was not advisable for her to come and take care of a baby. And my initial reaction was one of, oh my God, in my entire life, I've never missed Rosh Hashanah. Like, this is terrible. And I was going to stay home with the baby. And then that morning, it just, what started as anger just completely transformed. And I realized I was where I was supposed to be, when I was supposed to be. I was caring for the next generation. And I just felt like, to this day, it's the holiest Rosh Hashanah I've ever had, because it just felt like I was in the right place at the right time.
Amazing. I know that our child was born on the last day of Elul. We spent Rosh Hashanah in the hospital, so I resonate deeply with that kind of Rosh Hashanah experience. Amazing. Thank you. Alina, why don't you end for us, and we'll go back.
Yeah, I was 16 and my aunt and cousin came from France to Israel for my brother's bar mitzvah. And they are Christians. So I had to take them. So they wanted to go and see. That was before we had the other part of Jerusalem together, before the 67 war. And but they wanted to go and see the holy places for Christianity. And I took them with the bus to Jerusalem. And starting the trip, I had this horrible feeling. I mean, literally, like a panic. I forgot to tell my father to be careful. And I didn't know from what, I didn't know from where this feeling came to me, but it was like life and death experience for me. It was so intense. And those days, it was not 20 minutes to go to Jerusalem. It was much longer. And in the middle of the road, all of a sudden, this calm came over me and said, even though I forgot to tell my father to be careful, everything will be okay. And I forgot about it. We spent the whole day in Jerusalem, in all the holy places, and went around and came back with the bus home. And my father was in textile. He had a factory and he was working with the machines that oreg. You know what oreg means? The machines are automatic that goes from side to side
Weave.
with a tip, with a tip that is basically metal tip. And everybody was shushing and fussing, and I said, "What's going on? What's going on?" And they said, "Don't ask. Your father was really, really lucky. The machine malfunctioned, and it got out of the machine and hit him in the head, but close to the artery, not in the artery. So he had a concussion, but he was okay. He didn't bleed, he didn't." So I don't know how to explain it, but it was unbelievable, the emotions that I had.
Amazing. Thank you, Helena. So what I want to do is I want you to just take a moment and think about the story you shared or other stories, and that feeling when that moment struck you, right? And that's going to be a moment that we're going to talk about in our text today. I'm going to share my screen. You'll tell me that you can see it, hopefully. Everybody see this okay? Give me a thumbs up. So, yes? Okay. So I'm going to do one more thing before I do that. This is what the book looks like. It's a little blurry, you'll forgive me. The text on the top right here where my finger is, that's the text. This is the commentary, and these are the references. I've tried my best in the Tzidkat Tzaddik is very terse. He says a lot with very few words. And so what I've tried to do is offer that translation and commentary as a combination. So I haven't distinguished between the words here, but I've tried to embed it with so it'll be easier to understand. So you'll forgive me for being liberal in my translation and commentary here, but for the sake of understanding, that's my hope. Okay. Let's get started here. So you'll see that I have put the text here on top, and we'll go little by little. Can I get a volunteer to read in the English where it says the beginning? Does anybody want to volunteer?
Sure, I will.
Please.
In the beginning of a person's entrance into their service to God and deepening their spiritual practices, one needs to do this with haste and speed, like when we find.
Wait, let's pause there. Let's pause there. We're going to pause a lot because there's a lot of words. There's a lot happening in a very few words, right?
Yeah.
So Reshit Knisat Adam, the beginning of a person's entrance into their service of God, La'avodat Hashem, they need to do it with chipazon, with haste and speed. Yeah, Tybal.
So many modern synagogues that let people pick B'nai Mitzvah dates according to social calendars are not listening to this advice. Because a Jewish human being is B'nai Mitzvah when reaches the age, not when observes the ceremony and has the party and has the aliyah.
Great.
That also means that the parents aren't saying the Sheptarani blessing in a timely way either.
Great. So that's a really nice read. It has not. This one does not have to do with bar mitzvah, although another one we learn will. So stay tuned. But I like that read. Right, the beginning of one's service to God happens when we become adults. Right. I love that. I think this is being a little bit more esoteric than that, but I love that. I love that read. Okay, so at the beginning of a person's entrance in their service of God, wherever that may be in that moment, at whatever age they may be, in whatever season they find themselves, they should do that with haste and speed. Now, hopefully you haven't read ahead. Why might we want to do this? What does haste and speed, b'chipazon, why might we want to do this? What advantage is there that we're offering? Yeah, Tybal.
Sorry, because you might die. You might have been intending to and didn't get it done in time.
How about just general distraction?
Great, right. Okay, so there's we never know
You
what
don't
might
have to
happen,
die,
right?
Tybal.
There's a danger, right? It's true, it's possible. Michelle, say yours again.
That it just distraction, that you could get distracted and start, I don't know, doing something mundane or not to your goal.
Right, there's some sort of opportunity that's happening. We have to be careful to take advantage of it. Great. What else? What else do people see?
Well, it's sort of the when you have that initial idea, it already creates an impetus or a motivation. Like you're still, that idea is a flash of energy too. And so get yourself going. The momentum starts.
You got to
like that.
start somewhere. You know, an object at rest stays at rest until it gets an uts, right? A nudge. Great. All right, let's keep going. Freda, will you keep reading for us?
Oh, sure. Like when we find during the story of the Passover in Egypt, when they were eating with haste, as it is said, and you shall eat it with haste, it will be a Passover offering to the Lord. And not like the Passover of the subsequent generations that do not eat in a rush at all.
Perfect. Right. So now we have this. Right. We should do this thing with haste and speed. B'chipazon. Where do we find this? Where does this come from? It comes from the Exodus from Egypt. And we have a verse, and the verse tells us, God tells us, you shall eat it with haste. B'chipazon. Right. There's an offering to the Lord. They're escaping. There's a lot. You have to do it fast. There's something happening. You got to do it fast. And there's something unique about that Exodus that's not true about all the subsequent ones. I don't know about you, but my Passover Seder does not feel like chipazon. Does not feel like it's happening with haste. Dafka the opposite. Feels like it's happening. It's taking a long time. Not in a bad way. It's not a fast process. What do people think about this? These two Passovers? Yeah, please.
Well, when I think of the initial Passover, it's like you weren't guaranteed the Pharaoh wouldn't change his mind again, you know? But after that first time, I think in a way that was a miracle what happened. And so you're spending time appreciating God's miracle.
Yeah. There's something unique about the first time a thing happens. Right? That first moment is actually different than all subsequent moments. And it's kind of like what you said, Tybal, right? Like there's a risk. Egypt and Pharaoh might be coming and chasing you down. You better do it. There's risk involved if you don't, right? And Michelle, like you said, right, the risk of distraction or something. The first Egypt is this moment that stands precarious, right? There's danger that you don't know what's going to happen. Every other generation, we're remembering the first one. It's not quite the same experience, right? The spiritual moment that you shared, if you shared one, your retelling of it is not the same as the experiencing of it, right? I have never had a Hanukkah like the Hanukkah that I experienced, right? Never again have I had a Hanukkah like that. I've had lots of wonderful Hanukkahs, lots of meaningful ones, spiritual ones, not like the first one. The first one is unique, is different. There's something about that first moment that really matters, that's fundamentally different. Anything else? What other people notice?
I noticed that it's a different word for haste than is used in the story of Abraham and the angels when they use maher. And they talk about how quickly he was to get meal and whatever he wanted to get. It specifically mentions maher, that he did it very quickly. So I'm curious about what the difference is in these words, because they seem to have similar meanings. And what's the difference of the haste?
Yeah. I mean, in English we have lots of words too, right? Haste, speedily, quickly, fast. And we all sort of collapse them into one, but they're not exactly the same. So it's a great close read. I've often seen the word chipazon translated as with alacrity, which is not much more helpful, to be totally honest.
Correct.
My sense of this is that this is happening with purpose, It's not just fast. It's fast for a reason. Fast with purpose. Sometimes with haste, we can understand it that it's done with abandon. And I don't think that, if you know what I mean, where it's happening without necessarily all of the thought process. And I don't mean that exactly. Where it's happening and you're just sort of flinging yourself at it. Chibazon doesn't strike me that way. It's slightly more intentional, but it's a great thought. Yeah, Tybal.
I don't know why, but when you said that, I thought of, by analogy, what an airline pilot has to do landing a plane. Because it's not with abandon, but it really does has to be done with haste and speed, because there are certain things that have to happen very quickly in sequence.
I love that, right? Fast doesn't necessarily mean reckless, right? Some things actually have to happen fast because that's the way they're designed, right? By whatever the external, the internal dynamics, right? Yeah, Shira.
I was thinking in terms of picking up on, the first time something happens, it's like your worldview changes. This new thing is in it, and it astonishes you, it lifts you up, you have an emotion that separates that moment from all others. And so that will speed you along, that will impress upon you the urgency.
Nice. I think that sense of urgency, that's a great phrase for us. We should hold on to that, because I think that's really useful. Let's keep reading, right? I'm going to read it in Hebrew first so that we get the flavor of what it sounds like, and then we'll read it in English. So we have that first sentence with chipazon, not like Pesach Dorot, Pesach of the subsequent generations. Mipnei, because, I'm not going to read it in English, I'm going to read it in Hebrew. Mipnei shehat chala lenatek atzmo mikol ta'avot olam hazeh shehu mikasher bahem. Tzarich lishmor harega shemit orer bo ratzon Hashem. I'll stop there. Can I get a volunteer to read this this next paragraph for us in English? Yeah, go for it.
This is because at the beginning of someone's spiritual journey, when they want to break themselves loose from all of the worldly desires of this world that one is connected to, one needs to watch for the moment when the will of God is aroused within them.
All right, let's pause there. There's a lot. Again, we're packing in a lot of sentences here, right? So let's translate from English to English here, right? Why is this chipazon moment? There's lots of chipazon moments in our lives. What's happening here? This is because, right, at the beginning of this particular season, this particular journey, right, we have lots of journeys that we're undergoing, right? Our lives are not one thing. There are lots of things overlapping with each other. And so in this particular moment of that journey, when we're trying to make a break from what came before, here he uses the language of breaking oneself loose from the worldly desires, right? All the things that perhaps move us away from spiritual attainment, right? So for the rabbis, they're not ascetic, A-S-C, ascetic in the sense that you shouldn't have stuff that you enjoy. That's not a preference. But not everything that's, physical and desirous is good. Just because I want to eat chocolate at the end of the day doesn't mean I should eat chocolate at the end of every day, right? That there are these moments we want to make a separation from what happened, what's going on, that path that I'm on. Rabbi Tzadok Cohen, Rabbi Tzadok is telling us we need to watch really closely for this moment when God's desire, the desire for God, God's desire for us, both of those things is aroused, mit orer, within us. We have to pay close attention. That, I think, is this moment that we were all describing before. Each of us are different. We have our different moments, different experiences. But that moment when something changed, when you felt something in your kishkas and you couldn't quite figure out how it came, where it came from, exactly how to describe it, that profundity, that is what I think he's describing here in this moment. That mit orer, that spiritual arousal that's happening. Okay, I want you to pay close attention to the physicality of that. Read the rest of the paragraph for us, if you don't mind.
This is when one must rush, at that very moment when inspiration strikes, to quickly escape from those worldly desires. And maybe then it is possible to change one's spiritual direction.
Okay, right. It's not enough. It's not enough that I'm paying attention. It's when that moment strikes, what do I have to do? I have to act. I can't just sit there. I can't just let that moment pass me by. I have to do something with that moment. Just because I want chocolate at the end of the day, and I'm inspired instead to not have chocolate, what should I do? Should I continue to sit there staring at the Reese's on the table? Absolutely not. Peanut butter and chocolate, I think, is a perfect divine combination of flavors. You'll forgive me. I should get up from the table. I should go do something else. And maybe I'm being silly with the chocolate, but there are lots of things in our lives where maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Or maybe I need to be moving in a different direction. And in that moment, there's no time to waste. B'chipazon, we need to get up quickly and take action. What do people think? What's resonating with you, or what's challenging you, or what questions are you sitting with? Yeah, please.
What it triggers is the vision of a switching of gears, like when you're doing a bicycle.
Say more.
Well, I mean, I think that there's it's both changing the speed of the wheels, but even that thing of changing the gear is a relatively fast thing that you do. And then it's really changing what you're doing.
Yeah, you can't change the gears and stop pedaling. Like Dafka, in that moment, you got to keep pedaling even harder, right? At least until you get to speed, right? We'll come back to that in a second as well. Great, that's a nice analogy. Have any of you felt this moment where you were struck? You're like, I should be doing something different. This thing that's I better jump on this opportunity. I think that what emerges from this, not just in spiritual life, but I think in so many parts of our lives, there are all these chipazon moments where we're asked to either, usually not a literal ask, to jump, to take the opportunity to leap into the thing, because there's a risk sometimes in the not leaping, right? The advice is often look before you leap. That's great, but if you're not leaping, sometimes you still miss the opportunity. There's a leap that's required. And I think sometimes you get inspired, you want to go for a run, right? So if I don't put my shoes on right when I get inspired, I might stay on the couch, right? These chipazon moments come all the time. Sometimes deep spiritual, and I think there's invitation for us here to think about all the ways that are in our Judaisms where we have these chipazon moments, but it shows up all the time. But it's not as simple as that. He says, "V'achar kach shuv yelech b'mitinut uleat kedin Pesach darot." After that, after this chipazon moment, one can then return and go moderately and slowly, once they have broken free from their desires and are on the spiritual path, like the laws of Passover for subsequent generations. So we have these Pesach chipazon moments of that first Pesach from Egypt. But once we've made speed, once we've crossed the threshold, going too fast might actually be no good. And we got to slow down. Take stock. Okay, I took the leap. How do I make progress now? I felt inspired. I took the action. Okay, time for a deep breath. All right, that's all the other Passovers that happened. I know for me, my own spiritual journey, I find the waxing and waning, the sine wave of inspiration and then slowness, and inspiration and slowness. And I think that wave is, first of all, natural, but something we have to pay attention to. And at the same time, right, Tybal gave us the framework of bar mitzvah, or b mitzvah, or whatever phrasing works for you. But here, his language is the beginning of one's service. That service is always present. That relationship is always being invited. There's no turning it off. Only an opt-in, and opt-in, and opt-in, and opt-in, and opt-in, and opt-in. And so each moment calls for us to then ask, is this a chipah zone moment? Is it not a chipah zone moment? Is there a chipah zone moment in your, let's say, recent experience, or something that calls for you, that resonates in your personal experience? Yeah, Helena.
At work, I had to act bechipazon in order to save somebody's life.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to hesitate when it comes to something like that. In that moment, did you find that there was a time afterwards to go with b'mitinut, with slowness?
Yeah, I would thank God for being able to do it.
Yeah.
If I had a difficult case ahead of time, I would say, please help me do the best I can for the patient when it was complicated.
Yeah.
And you know it from the beginning.
Sometimes we have opportunities like that to psych ourselves in, right? To get ourselves mentally, spiritually prepped. And sometimes we don't. Sometimes the moment strikes us and we have to be ready for it, even if we're not ready for it.
Correct.
Right? We have to hold both of those. Yeah, Shira.
When my husband was dying, I had to put myself in a different space to comfort him, to help usher him out of this world. I mean, I couldn't be thinking about myself and what I might need. I had to just really be focused on, what was he comfortable? Was he at peace? What was there anything that was going to disturb him? And and it was an involvement in the well-being of another person. you know I mean, I imagine, I've never been a parent, but you become, that child arrives, and it's all about that. It's all about everything that child needs. And your sleep and everything goes by the wayside.
There are, we'll sort of stick with this bicycle analogy, right? There are different gears. Not every moment calls for the same gear, right? Sometimes we have the need to be more selfless, right? To focus our energies on the service of others. And sometimes we have perhaps the opportunity to be more selfish, not in a bad way, but in a good way, to take care of ourselves, right? Different seasons, different moments. And chipazon b'mitinut, those two of the Pesach from Egypt and the Pesach of Dorot, of generations, right, are two of those modes. Not the only ones, but two of those modes. Thank you, Shira, for sharing that. I think one of the challenges, is, I'll speak for myself. I think one of the challenges that I experience is I feel that sense of inspiration a lot, and then I let the mitinut, the slowness, take over, which is I get really inspired and I jump in, and a couple of weeks goes by, and okay, well, yeah, I got stuff going on, and I gotta have to drop off, pick up, and there's laundry to do, and it slows down too much. And I think one of the opportunities that Rev Tzadok is inviting us is to be on the lookout for that mitorer moment, that inspiration moment, that spiritual arousal moment, because it's happening all the time if we're listening closely. And it's easy in the volume of regular life to drown it out. But if there's all of these moments that we're quiet, that profound quiet. I think Shira, you were talking about in Hawaii, right? It was like maybe you can hear something really different, or for folks who have been on a silent retreat, right? Where every time, sometimes where you hear your own heartbeat in your ears, right? It's like if you're not quiet enough, you can't hear it. There's a real opportunity there. Yeah, Tybal.
I'm sorry if senior moment you covered this and I missed it in the intro, but when you were saying that, is Tzadok the name his parents gave him, or is it a name he took for himself because of the root and the meaning and the history?
I believe that is his name, as given by his parents, Rabbi Tzadok Cohen of Lublin, although I think the Lublin came with time. I didn't give you much of his bio, which is quite an incredible journey, which I promise I will share. I wanted us to be able to jump right in, but it is given his name. The book Tzidkat Tzaddik, the righteousness of the righteous one, is certainly a fun play on his own name, Tzadok. Right, all coming from that same word. This whole book, very briefly, I can tell you more of a story another time, but very in brief, he basically finished the Talmud at the age of 8, and it's just a tremendous. Comes from the Lithuanian tradition. He was against Hasidim. He was in tremendous opposition, and it was only through this incredible set of events that he encounters the Ishbitzer Rebbe, and finds that he is transformed at the moment. Later on, when he becomes a father of the Ishbitzer, a letter is written from one of his friends back home saying, "I heard you became a Chassid. I can't believe it. You used to tell people that you could defeat any Chassid in argumentation. You have to tell me if this is true, because it can't possibly be true." And he writes back and he says, "I judge something from a distance. You shouldn't judge things from a distance. You have to experience it up close, and I was wrong. And now that I've experienced it up close, I learned it's something different." And this book, Tzidkat Tzaddik or Tzidkas Tzaddik, emerges from the first year of his study with the Ishbitzer Rebbe. This is the learning he does. This is what he writes in that first year. And I mean, this book is 2 volumes. It's hundreds of these takeaways, these lessons. Some of them are longer, some of them are shorter. This is the first one. And really just an incredible thinker. Later on becomes the leader of the Ishbitzer community, is really quite, I mean, this is such an interesting figure. We barely scratched the surface of his story. Yeah, Tybal. And then
I'm used to people getting names from the name of their most significant book. So that's what I had originally assumed it was from his book. Like, actually, you may know him if you know the local teacher, Norman Shore. Do you know Norman? Oh, well, he's descended from Bechor Shore. That's how they have the secular, and Chassam Sofer. I mean, all these people,
yeah,
it's their, or even, you know what I mean? It's their greatest hit becomes their name.
Yeah, so he was profoundly prolific that we only have some of it. There are like dozens of books that I think on Safari you can find about 8 to 12 of his books, and that's only what survived. Not all of it survived till now. Incredibly prolific, and because of that, he's really known as Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin, and not his book, because he was so prolific. Yeah, Teresa, please.
So I'm wondering if this that you've presented to us is the beginning of his text, and if this also to some extent is autobiographical, because then when he found that moment, he must have it sounds like he quickly immersed himself with the Ishbitzers
Torah.
lesson. Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. I hadn't thought of that at all. Yeah, I think that feels there's some deep Torah there, right? Like that he literally experienced this and is articulating it for us so that we might benefit from it as well. I think that's right. I think that feels right. I can't say for sure. We don't know for certain, but let's take that. I think that's a great read. Yeah. Rabbi Tzadok, his texts are very terse, and we have the commentary. That's why you can see the Hebrew is not that long, but I've written so much English. It's just so that we can start to parse it. What we'll do over the course of the next number of weeks is unpack some of the additional lessons from the beginning of this book. We're not going to do everything. There's we'd be here for years if we were to do that. But we'll take a selection of the first handful and dig into them. And in the very beginning, it's all very much focused on these small spiritual moments, these small encounters, the small parts, right? He's not going to, here he's talking about the beginning of one's service to God, but he's talking about moments, rega, the moment you have the inspiration, these tiny little steps. And so I want to invite you over the course of the 6 or 7 weeks, all right, we're not meeting over Thanksgiving, so 7 weeks, the next 6 or 7 weeks, is I want you to try your best to listen for the chipazon moment. I want you to listen closely for it in your life. I want you to see if you can see the chipazon moment and say to yourself, this is a moment where I should move quickly, right? I'll have time to slow down later on. But throughout our learning, there are going to be these moments, the invitations, opportunities. I know a number of you were at Evening Minyan tonight, and there will be some pieces about this, about Ma'ariv, about the evening service, about the Shema. Those will be opportunities for us to dig deeper, to think about these moments in deep ways. The first 30 or so, we're not going to go through all 30, I promise you, but the first 30 are inspired by, connected to loosely Masechet Brachot, the beginning of the Talmud. And with Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen, he's so learned. He's such a mastery of text that he sees things that nobody else sees. And we'll get a chance to get a peek into those as well. I'm curious to hear from you if you feel like you have experienced the subsequent generations part, right? So we talked a lot about the chipazon moment. We talked a lot about this moment we get inspired, but I want to think also about the slowness, where you actually get to just marinate in that experience that you've sort of set yourself towards. Is that resonant? Is that experience for you? Like in my Hanukkah example, every Hanukkah I think about it, right? I don't like the same way. It's not the same experience. I don't get inspired exactly the same way, but every Hanukkah is informed by, inspired by, connected to that first one. I mean, it wasn't my first Hanukkah, don't get me wrong, but like that Hanukkah spiritual moment. I'd love for you, in maybe the spiritual story that you shared, if you shared one, to talk about how that's changed you since. What does that look like for you? And maybe in light of this text. And Fred and Susan, I'd love to bring you into this too. I know you haven't had a chance to say something, but the door is open if you want to. No stress, no pressure. Anyone want to share? Yeah, Teresa.
I can if no one else is. Well, after that initial experience, I really needed to learn Hebrew, and I also was very interested to learn Talmud. But as I started with the Aleph Bet, I eventually realized fairly quickly that it probably would be 20 years before I could sit and look at Talmud. It really it was the external circumstances that slowed me down, along with having young children and being like, I have to focus on them. Like I went through a phase of doing lots of meditation, then And then in meditation, it's like, I need to go be with them. So it's like that outside circumstances change things. However, I think maybe the one point was that in identifying what I could connect with and find the spirituality there, then even though I slowed down, I had this connection and conviction about what it was I was seeking and what I was working at. And so then the urgency, I was more bound. It's sort of what he described in the text. I was more bound to what it was, and I both could not rush it, and I didn't need to.
Yeah, we talked a little bit earlier. Michelle had asked the question about the word haste, right? Chipazon, why not maher or something else? And I offered that chipazon was something moving with purpose, quickly with purpose. And I think that that's a piece of it, right? Which is that once you've moved with purpose, that purpose stays with you. The movement may not, but the purpose does. And right, just because right, the purpose of right, this is where when you start to see the layers in the text, right? What is unique? Why did the Israelites want to leave Egypt? What was their purpose? To serve God, to be out, to do the things that their people do. And of course, Rabbi Tzadok draws on this at the beginning of our service of God, that this is the moment of inspiration. Both the Israelites are serving God and we're serving God. Again, define those terms as you wish. I'm not putting a theology on you. You could believe what you wish about God. But that there's a reason. That reason sticks with us, right? Freda, you talked about working with people with HIV in the 80s, right? That was the example you gave, right? You don't have to, I mean, you can share if you'd like to, but like, I can imagine that has inspired you since. That sense of purpose has remained with you in profound ways. Helena, I know you're a physician. That sense of purpose is something you've shared with me over time, right? It sticks with you, right? And certainly in the examples you gave, even the example you gave about your father, right, was one of medical consequence, right? Those things stick with you, right? It's not just speed, it's speed with purpose. I think we often get lost. I think, to each their own. But there's often a desire for people to say like, oh, I have a reason for all the things I'm doing, right? My life has purpose. I'm doing everything in my life should lead to a particular point. I don't think that that's true, first of all. I think it's about each movement, right? It's like a symphony. Each one, there's a movement. There's like a period, a season, a section, and that can have purpose, and that purpose trickles down in all the other parts. It inspires everything that comes afterwards. The Jewish calendar is cyclical, right? We think of Jewish life in a circle, not a linear, but it's a circle. Things are constantly repeating ourselves. We're not just leaving Egypt at the Seder, we ourselves are leaving Egypt every year, right? The Rambam says we should see ourselves, or the text of the Mishnah and the Rambam are different, but we should see ourselves as coming from Egypt, right? Every time we get inspired, it pulls on every time we were inspired before. Every time we have a spiritual experience, it pulls from the spiritual experience before. Every time we have a chipazon moment, it builds on the previous one, even if there's a lull in between. And so, as I said before, and with this, we'll come to a conclusion, or I'll invite people to share any last thoughts that they have, is that as I deepen my own study of the Hasidic literature and the Rabbis, I'm actually taking a class in Chassidut myself. Right? We're all learning. We're all in the journey. These texts are not just meant to be learned from a distance, right? Just like Rabbi Tzadok, they have to be done up close. They're part of our lives, right? This Torah is now a part of you. What you do with it will be up to you. And so I want to invite you to that listening for the chipazon voice, that moment where I'm feeling the kitarut, that inspiration, that arousal in the moment. Oh, this is a moment where I need to take action. It's going to happen. It probably happens every day and we don't always hear it. So I want to invite you to just pay close attention to that moment over the course of maybe the next week. Maybe we can talk about it next week and what happens to you. There are spiritual opportunities at every moment, and we just have to be close attention. And so I'll leave you with that, just to invite you to be to do that listening for the chipazon moments. I'll invite anyone else who has any last thoughts, and if not, I'll see you all next week. Amazing. All right, see you all next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.